Okay, hello everyone and welcome to fifth masterclass and start for this fall. My name is Ilkka Rahkonen and I'm from Film Tampere. And on behalf of us and Business Oulu and APFI, it's so great to see you all here. There's almost 200 registrants for the seminar, which is great. Welcome everyone. This is a really interesting topic. And the topic is pitching today, of course, as you know, and more to follow because we are right now working also to arrange international pitching event, which dates will be announced soon, and it will be a great event with some very interesting international guests and a really good business meeting for people. Before we start today, I'd like to introduce a new head of audiovisual business. Audiovisual productions promotion at Business Finland, Hanna Vuorinen. Great that Business Finland is investing in this business. And Hanna, next 45 seconds is yours.
Thank you, Ilkka. So hey, nice to meet you all. I'm Hanna Vuorinen, and on behalf of Business Finland, just quickly saying hello. I think the audiovisual industry in Finland has huge potential to grow and develop and to play a bigger role on global markets. But I know everyone is waiting to hear our star panelists today, so I won't take more of your time, but happy to meet you all.
Good to see you, Hanna, and welcome also this side of business to see what we can achieve and do. But we have great panel today, and I let fabulous Todd Brown take control of it and introduce our panelists.
Hello, thank you all for being here. My name is Todd Brown. I am the head of international acquisitions at XYZ Films, and it is my great pleasure to do this today. So we're here to talk about pitching, which obviously is super important to the process all the way across this industry. You're always having to present your ideas. You're always having to try to convince some people that your ideas are good ones and that you are the person to execute them. And so what we thought we would do is gather a group of people together who are basically the people you're trying to convince in many cases. So joining us today and the people who are being pitched to talk about, from our perspective, what we're looking for, what works, what doesn't work, as well as having Lindsay Peters here with us as well, who is somebody who's more historically has been involved in helping people prepare their pitches and involved in markets and things that are all about kind of getting you from the idea stage to introducing to market. So our thinking was to take it from that side of the line, to be able to say from kind of over here and from people who are kind of interacting with pitches in volume all the time, what we're looking for, what we find works, what does not work. And when I do these sorts of things, I like it to be very, very conversational, and have a bit of a back and forth, especially with you in the audience. Obviously, your audio is not on. We will be keeping a close eye on the chat. If you have questions at any point, I know the screen at the opening there said that questions are going to be taken at the end. I actually don't think that's the case on this time because a lot of people sent questions in advance, and there are a lot of them, and they're very good. So rather than guessing at what might be useful to you, we're mostly going to be working from the questions that have been sent in. And if there's anything that we're talking about at any point that maybe doesn't make sense, if we're using language or terms that are not familiar to you, if it raises a secondary question, please put it in the chat. I can't honestly say we're going to get to everything because, again, there are a lot of them. But we're going to do as much as we can, and try to let you lead because we want to do things that are useful and valuable to you. So with that, I'm going to quickly get our panelists to introduce each other. I'm going to call on you in the order that you're on my screen, which is not going to be the same for everybody else. So just get you to introduce yourself, who you are, where you are, what you do, basically. Lindsay, we're going to start with you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Todd, and thanks to everyone for organizing this panel. So I'm currently in Montreal, Canada, where I am actually currently working for organizations in Vancouver and St. John's, Newfoundland. So I'm currently running the From Our Dark Side genre film development lab with Women in Film and Television Vancouver. And I'm also the industry producer for the St. John's International Women's Film Festival. And prior to that, for 6 years, I was the executive director of the Frontier International Co-Production Market, which is still a genre film market primarily based on project development. We did 3 events each year, the Frontier Market in Montreal, Canada, for projects in advanced development and early financing. We did the Frontier Finance and Packaging Forum, which was for projects at the midway point in their financing. And actually in 2018, I believe we were actually in Helsinki for that event. So it's nice to virtually be back for that. And then we did a platform in Cannes at the Marché du Film, which was for projects in advanced development and films in post seeking buyers.
And Celine?
Hi everyone. My name is Celine Haddad. I'm a project manager at Screen Ireland. So Screen Ireland is essentially, I'm guessing, the equivalent of the Finnish Film Foundation. So I'm part of a team who essentially reads and assesses all the development and production application that Irish producers make to us to try and get some funding. So we're a public body. We work across feature films, co-productions, TV drama, documentaries, and animation.
Right. And David.
Hi, so I'm David Meadeb, and I'm doing the acquisitions for Logical Pictures and Pulsar Content. And Pulsar Content is an international sales company, and Logical Pictures is its sister company, and we are doing production and financing. Both Logical and Pulsar work hand in hand on a numerous of projects, but at the same time, we are non-exclusive, and we are talking about 2 separate companies with their own identities and lineup. And the films that we do range from genre films to animation to straight art house films.
Just as kind of some general context as we're going, I'd love to talk just a little bit about kind of process and kind of day-to-day, how many projects are people looking at, and kind of at what stages, and when something crosses your desk, what do you like it to have to kind of catch your eye and let you know that yes, this is something that is worth me putting my time into. David, how many things are waiting to be read by you right now?
Right now, there are a lot of projects that needs to be read. I think we have maybe 60 projects to read right now, which is a lot, and it's the amount of project that we read really change on depending on the time of the year, depending the markets, and depending on a lot of things. Regarding the decision to in which order to read a project, so sort of speak, we try to most of the time we read them as they come along, and but I realize that whenever someone in the team or whenever I'm really excited to read the project, it's basically based on usually on a really good meeting with the crew, and when there is like a connection at some point, and something like an addition between the pitch, the visuals, and the meeting, and whenever there is like this real sensation of having met an exciting director. This is usually like the major factor in getting us excited to read the script, I think.
Celine, is that comparable for you and being in a public body as well?
Yes, I mean, I guess the main difference is when you're a public body, you know, as long as somebody is eligible for funding, we have to read their application. So I think when you have more of a kind of public service duty, and we're maybe slightly less, you know, kind of face to face than maybe David would be, in the sense that there is a formal application process. So, you know, even if somebody wants to meet and pitch me their idea, that's great, and you know, you can accommodate that at a festival, or if you're not too busy, you can take sort of general meetings. But you know, somebody's going to have to apply formally and make an application, so it's a bit more fiddly. But I suppose the good thing is that, you know, we owe everybody a response. We have to respond to everyone. We're actually not too bad at responding within an acceptable. We don't read as quickly as Todd. Todd is the fastest reader in the business, but you know, we have usually it takes us 8 weeks to respond and give a formal answer, and also give feedback if the response is negative. And just in terms of volume, so you get a sense, probably in development, we're talking 400 projects a year, and production, maybe 200.
I have people on my read list right now who would disagree with you on my speed. Everyone has been home developing through all of COVID. It's been a lot.
That's true. That's true. But still, you're a fast reader.
And Lindsay, on your side, in general, especially kind of working through Frontier and working kind of with the program at WIFT, and as you're trying to prepare people to get to this point, where do you see the biggest gaps? Because your whole role is kind of to be treading that line and helping people find the bridge. Are there expectations among kind of younger producers, or impressions of what this process looks like that you kind of regularly run into, where you're like, oh, okay, you need to adjust an expectation here, or maybe think about what you're doing a little bit differently? Are there kind of what are the most common things that you think that you run into in terms of feedback that needs to be given?
Yeah, I think in terms of getting everybody ready to pitch, you know, at WIFT Vancouver, it was actually really nice over the last year because, you know, partially thanks to the pandemic, we were able to stretch out the program because it happened online. So that gave us a lot more time to really work with the filmmakers to develop their pitch. Whereas previously with Frontier, you know, we were more or less expecting everybody to show up ready to go. And so it was nice to be able to be more involved in the process as the pitch developed, you know, from the initial application. And I think, you know, in terms of what we learned through that is just, you know, really encouraging filmmakers to take the time to get their personality across through the pitch. That was, you know, it was really great to be able to work a bit more on that, and to make it, you know, just to kind of find a balance between, you know, obviously sharing what the project is and what stage it's at, and, you know, the hard facts and all that, but also, you know, the importance of really getting, your personality through in the pitch, and why this project is important to you, and why people would want to work with you on this project. So it was nice to have a little more time to get to know the filmmakers, at least virtually, in order to develop that part.
It's interesting you brought that up. I mean, outside of XYZ, I also help run a co-production market in Macau, where we do not as much pitch rehearsal as I would like, but you use the time that you have. And I think every year, that's feedback that is given right at the beginning, is that in a verbal pitch, and David, I'd be curious to know if this resonates with you as well. When I'm in a room watching somebody pitch in person, it's a different thing than if you send me a pitch deck. It's a different thing than in different contexts. But in a live pitch, I'm mostly evaluating the pitcher, not the content. What I want to know is, can you tell a story? And everything else I can follow up on afterwards.
Yeah, I totally agree. And having said that, we all know that there is a difference between someone who's great at pitching and someone who's great at directing, because some people are really poor pitchers and great filmmakers. But it's true that there is, even the latter category of director, I would say, so something can always come across while meeting the person, or at least seeing the person, and the way they will, put a couple of things forward, or what I'm trying to say is that it's extremely important, but at the same time, we know that the best pitches are not necessarily the slicker one or the most polished one or the best one. It's almost like, to some extent, it's almost like stand-up comedy. There is something that's relating between the person and the audience. So yeah, absolutely. And I think also when you see someone in person pitching a project, it's also a great reminder that basically is going to be the boss of a whole crew, and this is the person who is going to lead like 20 or 30 person to make their vision come true.
Yeah. I mean, we have a couple of questions that kind of tie into this, so I'm going to build towards some of those. But I mean, I'm always curious about kind of people's impressions in terms of the material that should be in your written pitch, or if you're presenting to somebody cold and like sending an email.
Did we lose Todd?
Oh, no.
Okay, it's not just
There
me.
we go. I'm back. There we go. But that idea that there are certain things that should be in an email submission that you probably shouldn't do when you're pitching in public. And I have my personal particular issues. There are certain things that I hate when people spend time on them in a live pitch. Versus kind of, we're now in this kind of digital hybrid world, where you're doing kind of both. It's sort of in person, it's sort of not. But are there certain things that you would say are absolutely essential in kind of an emailed submission versus, if you're going to spend, like when you're doing the live pitch, things that you should probably just skip over and say, look at the email package? Or should I just throw my examples in there? Because I obviously have some.
Oh yes, yeah, I'm dying.
I mean, like in an emailed submission, always it's like you'll have your pitch package. You'll have like, we can't have a meaningful conversation inside the company unless there's a finance plan attached, because we just don't know what you're asking for. And honestly, for me, when something comes in, we don't expect really the budget and the finance plan to be finalized. But we have to see them to understand the context and to understand a little bit about how you're thinking. But I've been in pitches, on live stage pitches, where somebody has thrown their budget top sheet on a screen and started walking you through it. And I've always thought, like, what on earth are you doing right now? Nobody's absorbing any of this information. It's the dullest thing possibly imaginable. Just come in and tell me, if, like, to me in a pitch, when you're talking about your financials, if it's any more than 30 seconds of here's what we already have, here's what we're looking for, you're probably doing it wrong. And there's a few of those things, I think, that kind of carry over between kind of what should be in a written package versus what should be in a spoken presentation.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would agree with that, when I get an email from someone, I want like to the point information. I want to know you've got a project. What are you looking for? Development, or like, I want the obvious. Is it production? Is it a production conversation? Is it a development conversation? Give me a little bit about the project, but there's nothing worse for me than and I would consider myself, I'm of a generation where we used to have attention spans, and I can see it. Even I have changed, and I cannot bear an email where I have to scroll down, and try and find what the ask is. So in a way, I prefer something which could be construed as being rude, but to me isn't rude, because it means you're aware that, we don't have a lot of time. So give me the bullet points. What is the ask? And then maybe attach something that's longer form, because if you've piqued my interest, I'm going to click on your attachment, and then I'm going to see a little bit more. But so I would say by email, brevity and clarity is the best thing you can do. And don't be afraid of being rude, because I think people just prefer something that's simple, as opposed to very long emails, which I get all the time. And you just go, I really did not, like, literally, I know it sounds like 2-3 minutes isn't a big thing, but the vast majority of the time you get so many emails, and you open one and then the phone rings, and then so yeah, I would say brief and quick. In this instance.
I would also say as well a sense of, what does the filmmaker actually want from you as potential partners, as decision makers? Why are they coming to you specifically? What do they need? What do they like about you as a potential partner, or what, brought them to you? And also, yeah, what exactly can, you do for them, for the filmmakers? And to also just kind of show that, you put some thought into this. You're not just sending out a general blast to anybody with money.
Yeah, those kind of blanket emails, I will say, they're really obvious. Everyone can tell immediately.
Especially when you forget to change the name and it's the wrong name because you copied and pasted and not change it. But yeah, probably, yeah, better to try and make it a little bit personal.
Yes.
One question that came in here, which I think is kind of specific to the time that we're in, is we do have a few questions in terms of kind of, we're in this sort of hybrid world, and I think kind of this Zoom pitching world is gonna continue. I mean, some of these tools we're just going to keep using. And from your perspectives, how has that changed this process? Are there things in there that you think are specific strengths, and are there certain things in there that you think people really still need to kind of prepare for a little bit differently than doing it in kind of the normal historical way of doing things?
On my end, I feel that the Zoom pitching, I think that right now there are two kinds of Zoom pitching. One that we that we can encounter when we go to co-production market. For instance, it was Frontier a few weeks ago, and this is very well structured. So we know that we have 20-25 minutes for each meeting, so everything is to the point. It's much more structured, and also when you really give your full attention to the meeting and to the general event, I think that it can be some really great few days of being extremely focused on meeting people and hearing project and everything. But otherwise, the unscheduled Zoom pitching can be sometimes a little bit overwhelming, because from time to time we know when they start, but we have no idea when they're going to finish. And we can go from 20-minute pitch to like a 60-minute one, and it's a little bit more complicated, but I feel that that if I'm talking about the co-production market and those type of lot of pitching in a row, there is almost a complementarity between the Zoom ones, the one that we do only by Zoom, and the one that we do physically. I think that what's missing is obviously like the water cooler conversation that we can have with other buyers and even with the different teams. But I also feel that when the event is really well organized, and for instance, Frontier was a good example. Like it's really like a really super focused time where we basically have nothing but the muscle left, and I really tend to enjoy them more and more.
Lindsay, did you find you were prepping people differently, kind of as the tools have changed?
Yeah, I mean, well, so the WIFT program that I'm organizing does actually feed into Frontier. So the filmmakers that were part of that program did their final pitch at Frontier. And as we got them ready to pitch, initially we were prepping them strictly for a live pitch, which we were historically used to. And we did do a Zoom pitch session with a jury of industry that was just private. And then for Frontier, it pivoted to a video pitch, so pre-recorded. So we were preparing the filmmakers for both. So the video pitch was actually a really interesting process, and I think really beneficial to the filmmakers, also because they now have this recorded video that they can use for other purposes as well as they develop the projects. Yeah, I mean, the feedback that we got from our filmmakers was that they had a great experience. It was basically, the way that it worked is that the industry participants could view the video pitches, I think, starting 2 days in advance of the market. The videos could be up to 8 minutes, but I think most people used actually far less than 8 minutes, which made a lot of sense. And then they did their 20 to 25 minute Zoom meetings or on a virtual platform. So I think it worked quite well, and a lot of the filmmakers had a lot of fun with the video pitch. They really used it as an opportunity to again get their personality across. It was a great opportunity for the director to really showcase their abilities. But yeah, I did learn from the whole process that less is more, I think, in terms of the video pitch, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I would kind of throw in, I was this last year, I was actually on the other side, being the person pitching at two fairly significant projects. I was part of like this documentary hybrid that was in the Sundance Catalyst program, and had a series project going out. And so for the Sundance, our primary pitch was like 20 minutes long. Kind of just the three of us going completely by Zoom, nobody in the room. We weren't even in the same room with each other. And then similarly with the series one, except those pitches were typically half an hour to 45 minutes of a single project. And the two things that came out of both of those was a real emphasis on just, there are more tools available now. And so you can add different things. One of the things we did on the series project, which I hadn't seen before, and I haven't had anyone do it to me, I wish more people would, is on Zoom, you can focus things. So we had one window open at all times, which was Tony, our writer, showrunner for the series, kind of him talking. So you would have a personal eye connection, personal connection. And then we had a window above him that was our visuals. And somebody else was running the visual deck as he was talking. So Tony could focus purely on what he was doing and carry his personality, but we had something else that was laying out this world at all times as he was going through. And it was an actual human doing it. So, if he sped up or he slowed down, he wasn't having to stress about his timing. And similarly at Catalyst, the same thing happened. And we had video incorporated within the 20 minutes that we were kind of cutting in and out of us speaking or something that had been pre-recorded and laid out being presented. And the biggest lesson with both of them is if you're pitching in this context, rehearse. You really, 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 really have to rehearse to get comfortable in your presentation and being on. And if you're using any kind of tech tools, you've got to tech check it to death, and really make sure that kind of you're there and that you have fallbacks and that everything's going to work as it's expected to. But it really does open up a lot of things that you couldn't really do in another context. That I thought was really exciting, and I would kind of love to explore it a little bit more. And I think it has the potential of really helping something stand out to people, to kind of add that layer. A question for all of you, and I think there's going to be a lot of different answers to this depending on what the project is, but it's a good baseline question. And I'm sorry, I don't have the names of people who sent these in. I only have the questions. But what's the best way to approach companies where to pitch that you want to pitch? Do you email? Do you call? Do you LinkedIn? And is there kind of a way of knowing who in there should you be reaching out to? Is that a producer, a head of development, somebody like that? If people feel like they have a project that is relevant to you, how can they find you? And what is the best way to approach you?
For us, the email is really a good way, and also all our contacts are on Sinando, so it's pretty easy to find. And And otherwise, I'm also on LinkedIn, but I think I connect to my LinkedIn account maybe twice a year. So it's not as efficient as the normal email. And otherwise, everybody in the company, you know, if someone else in the company gets an email that is actually for acquisition, they will automatically forward it to us. So it's extremely efficient that way.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go next?
Yes. Yeah,
yeah, so I mean, I think, look, for us, same thing, we're very easy to find because we're a public body. So you will, you know, you can see everybody's pictures, you have our emails. I would say email is by far the preference. Now, you know, this is a very personal thing, but I know that I just like emails, and I really don't like when people get in touch through LinkedIn or through Twitter. Like I've had quite a lot of people approach me on Twitter, and it drives me. So I am old school, though, mind you. You know, maybe it's not an issue among the younger crowd, but to me, I'm just like, I'm on Twitter not in an official capacity. This is my personal account. You know, I've had people get in touch on Twitter at the weekend, and it's just like, no, just don't do that. Do an email, and by and large, emails. You know, whether you have Senando or through your friends, or if it's a public body through websites, you're going to be able to find the email quite quickly. So I would say that's the best way of doing it. And then I think with a lot of things in life, knowing your audience is a good idea. So if you're trying to get in touch because you have technical questions about an application or deadlines, or, you know, get in touch with the coordinator. You know, the last thing, you know, the people who are, you know, maybe super busy trying to, you know, look at applications, manage a slate of lots of projects, they have films in production. If somebody gets in touch with me and asks me what the deadline of the next round is, I don't, you know, I mean, by and large now, I don't even respond, because I'm just like, just show that you're professional. A, it's actually on our website. B, if you can't find it, because sometimes it's, you know, fair enough, it's not website, it can be messy, but you can see there's a coordinator. That's a simple question that a coordinator can ask. If you're wanting to get in touch with me because, for example, you want 10, 15 minutes of my time, then great, email me. But I think knowing what to ask to who is a good idea if you can do that.
Yeah.
No phone calls ever.
No phone calls ever. Agreed.
Yes. I have a hate relationship with my phone. And honestly, it's incredibly inefficient. I mean, I'm not sure what the scenario and the laws are in Europe compared to here, but spam calls are enormous. If I don't know your phone number and I don't have a call scheduled, I'm not picking it up ever. I check my LinkedIn even less often than David. And I'm very much the same as Celine in terms of people reaching out on social media. I'm mostly on Facebook, and there's a handful of people who really should know better, who I have told several times, don't send me work stuff here, who continue to do it. And absolutely, it impacts the working relationship. It's really frustrating. It's really invasive. When you're in a job that, I mean, I think everybody who does this job does it because they want to find things, and they love to find things and support things. And we make ourselves pretty easily accessible. So access us that way, the way we're supposed to be. You know, and both for anybody who didn't pick up on, I mean, David, Celine, I think everybody mentioned Senando at some point.
Yes.
If you don't have a Senando account, get a Senando account.
Yes.
That is by far the best way to find the people that you need to find.
Mm-hmm.
And you can usually get one through, if you have a badge at Cannes or Toronto or Sundance or any of the major festivals, that usually comes with a Senando membership for a year.
Yeah.
And context. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go.
No, I was just saying that I think the worst way to get in touch with us is through text message on the phone.
I have a question here from Cesar asking what programmers are looking for at a pitch event. So this would be mostly in Lindsay's area. And, you know, so when people are coming, and yeah, what sorts of things, what are the thresholds? What are the mandates? Things like that.
Well, I guess it really varies based on the specific event that you're applying for. Should I just talk kind of generally about the submission process?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, generally what I've looked for in terms of calls for projects and putting together a project selection from that lineup is, you know, a well put together deck that gives a good sense of the project. Also a clear understanding of, we want to get a clear understanding of where exactly you are in terms of your financing and your development stage of the project. That's really important. Just a very clear sense of if you have any financing, where is it coming from? And also a projected finance plan as well, like how you currently plan to finance this project. Of course, we understand that, you know, no financing plan is ever locked or final or definitive, but we just want to get a good sense that you know where this, you know, this finance plan is going. And yeah, and essentially just a good, clear sense of what the story is. And, you know, broken down into different stages from, say, a log line, a short synopsis, a longer synopsis, and then, of course, the full script. And then, you know, and a sense of the team. So it's really those three components, the, you know, your financing, your story, and who you are as a team.
Yep. Yeah. And I would say, I think part of the question is as well knowing kind of who's going to be there, and like he's asking, you know, where production companies are looking for new projects and things. And I think part of that then is kind of on the filmmaker doing some research and looking. I think every project market out there has very specific taste, right? Like you have, like Lindsay has had a very specific mandate while you at Frontier. It's a similar one at WIFT, you know, specifically around genre kind of content. The project market that I run in Macau is specifically for projects that bridge both Asian and Western sorts of sensibilities. We lean towards commercially oriented stuff with some a couple of spots specifically for more art house stuff. If you were to look at like Torino or different, like Locarno, which just wrapped up, and kind of their Open Doors program and different things like that. Everybody has a really, really specific mandate. So it just, I think a lot comes down to just doing a lot of research to know, okay, where do things like me go? You know, and where have those been successful? Not only which films are being selected in these different events, but if you follow up a year or two later, which of those projects have actually been made, which project markets are actually being effective in pushing things forward, because they're not all equivalent. And there are some things that are very prestige-y that aren't necessarily super effective. And there are things that have strongly overlapping mandates. So say in the Asian context, the HAF in Hong Kong and the Busan market, how, you know, there's a lot of overlap. I would say one of them is much more effective than the other one. If you go through and just kind of crunch raw numbers, that should inform you in terms of where you're targeting. And then you'll also see by going through, okay, what has been there, who distributes those films, that'll give you a kind of a quick and dirty version of kind of which buyers are in attendance. But I think a lot of events too, if you reach out to the organizers in the off season and just be like, could you provide me with an industry list? Most people have that information on hand and are pretty able to share it in terms of just, here are the companies that come, here are the buyers that are here, here are, you know, producers that are regularly here looking for things that they can help co-produce. Most of that information can be had just by asking.
Oh yeah.
Not all of it, you know, people need to be somewhat protective in terms of like personalized contacts and things, but the top level, who's there and who would my audience be if I come to you, all of that stuff should be there. Yes.
I was just to say something else maybe, and depending on where people are in their career, but, you know, certainly for me, I know I've come to really like and pretty much prefer smaller events because I feel that, you know, like, for example, Torino or Les Arcs, or, you know, things where you're slightly less stressed, you have more time on your hands, you're maybe more prepared to give time because you don't necessarily have colleagues with you, and there's less, so I think it's worth looking at events where maybe on paper it's not Cannes, it's not Berlin, but actually you might be getting a lot more quality time with people. And some of those events, partly because some of them are held in brilliant, beautiful places, like Torino, the level of people who attend Torino is super high. So you have like the people running the companies, and don't say that to me disrespectful to some events, sometimes, because we all started like that. I remember when I was young, I would be sent to maybe the least prestigious one, and so you get the bright young thing, but who actually could absolutely enable you to access people at the company. But look, if on top of that you can get to the actual decision makers, and they're a bit more relaxed because their schedule isn't packed, that's really worth looking at those events, and they might be cheaper to attend anyway. So I would look at that as well, or I would look at that potentially as a way of making good relationships and maximizing the amount of time you spend at an event.
Yeah, the ability to socialize is a huge one. I'm the same way. There's a big events that you do because you have to, because everybody's there, and it's like, but I go to Cannes and I do 18 to 20 meetings a day that are kind of scheduled, and it's an exhausting grind. And I would much rather go to a regional thing where I can spend focused time with 5 or 6 people a day every day, or to an event like AAVI, where the first time I got invited to one of the bigger AAVI events, it's like everybody goes to dinner together. It's a scheduled thing, and it's like just walking along. I ended up just at random talking about UFO cult movies with the head buyer for ZDF, where I'm like, this is a weird conversation to have with someone like you, but this is kind of awesome. And you find kind of those like-minded people, which you can't really in a Cannes or a Berlin, because everybody is just pounding through volume.
Yeah, I totally agree. But also, I think well, we can also specify that, for instance, Torino is really different from other co-production markets, since it's a year-round development residency, basically.
Yeah.
Also.
A huge question here that there is no clear or easy answer for, but it's the big one for rising filmmakers. How do you successfully pitch a first feature film as a director? There is no clear, easy answer to that, but if there are certain things that you can have in your toolbox, what helps you stand out?
I think that I think that there are like 1,000 different ways for that. I think a great short film and can be more than enough to draw an interest. We do a lot of genre film, but we're also, for instance, right now acting as traditional French co-producers on a debut features by a Kenyan filmmaker. And basically, we decided to make the film just after meeting her for 20 minutes and before even reading the script, because it was almost love at first sight with that director, and then reading the script confirmed the impression, and it was like a no-brainer for us that we're going to do it. But it can be a script, it can be just a meeting, it can be a short film. I think short films are extremely important also. If I have to make like if I have to do maths in my head, I think that the main way for us to scout young directors that we want to work with on their first feature is usually through the shorts.
Yeah, I would say, maybe going back to what I said originally about getting a sense of your personality and your own passion for the project is still very important. And also just to remember that the pitch is just the first step. It's the kind of the first part of a conversation that you're having. So you don't have to get everything into the pitch necessarily. It's just, a foot in the door that can, ideally lead to longer conversations. because also it's, it's often a very long process getting partners for your project. So it takes time. So it's just good to remember that too.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds cliche when you say it or banal, but the best pitch to me is when I get a sense of the people who are across the table and who are being themselves and trying to communicate their passion and why they care about this particular project, why it connects with them, what it means to them, and who are not trying to second guess what it is I'm looking for. I mean, obviously, being a public body, we're in a good position in the sense that anything, like, we're looking for quality and we're looking for that famous word voice. But I can back a genre film, I can back a comedy, I can back anything, and not all companies can. So I would say knowing your audience as well is always a good thing, because you might not pitch or put the same focus on the same thing if you're pitching to a public body, to a sales agent, to a distributor, to a financier. So you need to also maybe refine the pitch so you adapt it to the people that you're talking to. But I would say, genuinely, I know it sounds so naff when you say it, but being yourself and just go for it and have no shame in what you have. You have what you have. It's not going to be for everyone. Sometimes you're going to have conversations and very quickly you're going to go, you know what, this is not going to go anywhere. But, it's no big deal. Just go for it. Because actually, even if the person across the table can't do anything for you, people, I think, connect with, passion and meaning. And so you might not work with this person on this project, but this person will remember you. So next time you're at a festival, you might just have a general meeting and learn. And one day maybe you have the project for this person. So it's a way of building relationships as well. And and being honest, being true to yourself. So if you're an art house, if you have an art house project, there's no point trying to tell us that, it's going to make a gazillion amount of money. It probably isn't. That the people who are going to back this project are not going to back it for that. They're going to back because the subject is great, or you have a really interesting angle. So yeah, just being honest, go for it, and just be prepared. Be prepared for failure, because the more you fail, the better you get at not failing, and everybody fails, and we've all had by and large more rejection than pluses. And Lindsay says it's also the beginning of a conversation. So I think you need to demystify the pitch. It's really important, but it's one cog in the whole machine. Anyway.
Yeah. Also, why, something to keep in mind in terms of building your pitch is why now? Why is this project happening now? Like, either for you personally, or what contribution is it? Do you hope that it will make, either culturally or to current conversations going on politically? Or what contribution are you going to make to the industry, to the marketplace through the project? Could also be helpful.
I think that's actually a really interesting lead into a question we just got in the chat from Greta, who was asking, if you're going to ask a filmmaker to tell you about themselves, what would you want to hear that's not just a synopsis of their CV? I mean, for me, it's like, in this context, if we're talking about kind of projects and films and things, it's like, kind of in the pitch, it's always about, why is this your story? I mean, why are you the filmmaker for it? What is the personal connection? And I think kind of what that answer is going to change for everybody, and person to person to person. But if you're going out, you're looking for partners that are going to be on. I mean, if things go well, it's going to be like 3 years. Like, if that's if things go really well. If it's a struggle, I mean, we've made a ton of movies that have worked really well and found audiences, but took like 5, 6, 7 years to get made and get out there. So it's like, why is this a burning thing for you? That is in you, that it's not just something that you want to do, it's something that you need to do.
Yeah, for sure. The why now, why you, and being very aware. I think it's become, certainly from our point of view at Screen Ireland, something that's key is we now live in a world where there's so much content. I mean, there was a lot to start with, but now it's even more. And we only have a finite amount of time. So I think for me, somebody who is aware of why their project is different, genuinely, like, has a sense of uniqueness, of the fact that you have something to contribute that, you know, maybe it's set in the same world, maybe, but it has a different angle. It has, you know, so I think having a sense of, yeah, of what makes your project special is a good thing, I think.
Well, and I think the answer to that question is always the filmmaker, if it's going to be special. You know, it's people get so hung up on the idea of uniqueness of story, and it's like, you know, there's all these literary theories out there. It's like, what, there's like 5 total stories or 7 total stories, depending on which theory you subscribe to. I'm more of the 5. Like, it's like there's not many. People are telling the same story over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and the only thing that changes is the perspective and the POV, and I need to understand why you're seeing this thing from a particular perspective and a particular angle.
Sure, yeah.
Moving on. We've been talking mostly about narrative, I think, in general. You know, we have a couple of questions in here from documentary filmmakers. Just asking in general, kind of what are the possibilities, what are the procedures out there for pitching documentary, and kind of the potential for co-production in the documentary world. Celine, is that something that's Screen Ireland works across both documentary and feature from a funding body perspective? How much do the criteria shift?
To be honest, they don't shift in a major way. I mean, I think, you know, the development, certainly the development process is very similar. You know, you're going to have an application form, you're going to have a little treatment. You know, obviously in documentary there won't be a script, so you know, it tends to be more like Bibles or treatments. And then, you know, there's the production line of funding, where actually, you know, we like film, where we tend to come on board first. I mean, so I'm talking about, you know, Irish production. So if it's coming out of Ireland, you know, we know full well that we're quite likely to come on first. So so it really is about the material and the track record of the filmmaker. And if they haven't something interesting to say, like what I'm saying is we wouldn't expect, you know, sales agent or finance to be in place yet. If it's a minority co-production from our point of view, so, you know, originated by somebody else outside the Ireland teaming up with an Irish project, we can look at those as well. The amounts will be lower, but all of that is on our website. So I think, you know, there's a lot you can pick up from companies' website, especially public bodies, because we have a duty of, you know, releasing quite a lot of information, but that's a possibility. And then the other fund that we've got is completion funding. So those are projects that, you know, essentially people have moved forward up to a point where they probably have, you know, 50, 60 minutes of footage and with a rough cut, and they just need that extra push. And by and large, there are projects that people have done on the side with their own dime, and they just need a little bit of backing. But yeah, I mean, you know, documentaries, it's a very specific area, and it's changing quite a lot. You know, there's more partners involved. Certainly what we found is that there's more partners involved, because you might find 20K here and 30K here, and it's more fiddly to put together, but it's absolutely something that, you know, we are paying very close attention to. Yeah.
David, how are Logical and Pulsar looking at the documentary world? Like, in some ways it feels like we're in a kind of a golden era with the way documentary is being embraced in the streaming world, but that's also a really particular buying market.
Yes, absolutely. We neither Logical or Pulsar so far has dwelled into documentaries, but we are. But we're about to get on board our first one, and for this one specifically, I felt that it was almost the same process as for fiction work, which is the directors has done a few short films, short documentaries. One that I saw in a festival and liked it a lot, and met the director and liked her a lot. And I think that the fact that there are so many great documentaries on the platform, I think you know, allows us to say, oh, that's probably a good timing to try a couple of ones, and even if we are talking about hybrid and something a little bit more radical, and but the timing is right, and it's the opportunity to jump on board, and but I at least for the one that we're about to do, it was exactly the same process as with a fiction film, which is we like the subject, we like the director a lot, and we want to try to help, basically.
Yeah. And one difference I've seen at XYZ, because we do have a documentary division of the company, and I'm just thinking in my head, and I might be wrong, but I don't think we've come on to a documentary project that didn't have some sort of a pitch reel ahead of time.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things with documentaries, because there is so much archival footage out there. There's almost no excuse for not having one.
Yeah.
And presenting, a bit of kind of the taste and your flavor, and what the angle is on the story, and how you're going to cut it and present the material. So I would say in the doc world, I mean, I'm sure I'm overlooking something. It can't be 100% across the board that we've done them that way, but I'm not immediately having something come to mind where there wasn't some sort of a reel when it came to us to say, okay, we get it. We understand why this and what makes this, something that exists in kind of the theatrical world or in the streaming world, as opposed to, a super dry talking head on public access TV sort of documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's exciting. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Celine.
You sure? Yeah. No,
Yeah.
It was just to say I agree with that. I think if it's a production funding conversation, not having your reel is not going to be great. So then it becomes about securing a little bit of development money somewhere to kind of help you execute that and do something really good. Now, obviously, because Ireland is a small country, we might be getting proposals from already established filmmakers, so we know their work. We don't really need the reel, but actually other funders are going to need it. So I think it's become a completely crucial part of the financing puzzle. And if you don't have it, you're going to really struggle. You're going to really struggle, even if you have name direct. I mean, you'd have to have like A-list names to maybe get away without one. Sorry, go for it, David.
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to say that on the one that we are specifically doing, the fun part about the discussion that we had with the director is that she had done a short film on the same subject, and actually most of the conversation was what is an approach of the feature film that will make it different from the short film. And that's more or less the same idea. We are working on something that is already there, but the discussion was, how are you going to make it actually different and make it in really a feature film?
Yeah. I just realized that I know what the project is that you're talking about, and it's amazing. It's so good.
Yeah, I would also say if you're a documentary filmmaker applying to a project market, it's definitely worth your time looking at specific markets that might be more narrative leaning, like say Frontier. At Frontier, we did have a few documentaries that we took in the past, mainly focused on genre film history or genre film culture. It can definitely benefit your project to maybe not be in such a doc specific environment. I would also suggest reaching out to the organization just to get that industry list to make sure that there are enough companies that can specifically work with a documentary. But kind of doing a mix of those plus doc specific markets could be great, like say hot docs or RIDM. I could mainly speak to Canadian ones. I'm sure there's many others out there that would be great. But yeah.
Talking about reels and things in the narrative world, how does everyone feel about the effectiveness of, say, an original proof of concept versus a rip reel cut together of other footage?
If you have an original proof of concept, great. I think it's a really specific situation. I mean, so it's, you know, if say you're adapting a short into a feature, that's a fantastic opportunity to make an original proof of concept. I think it really does depend on the project, because sometimes, you know, it's like, rather than spending the time and the money often out of your own pocket to make a proof of concept, maybe just focus on making the feature happen. If you're, say, a first-time director, a proof of concept can be a really great tool to showcase your work to potential partners. But also, you know, I've seen really good mood reels of footage taken from other sources that can be really effective, but they're very risky as well. So, you know, often trying to do a mix if you don't have a lot of footage to work with can be effective. But yeah, the mood reels are a very, very, very tricky thing.
Yes. And usually I think that the more effective ones are actually the ones that really actually focus on the mood of the film. Because I think it can be very easy to make something very efficient with monsters and everything if we're talking about a horror film, but something that is really just a 2 minutes reel that really tries to capture the overall mood of the film, whether it is just the setting, for instance, like visuals of the settings, travelings, you know, tracking shots in the street or something like that. It can be extremely effective because it allows the imagination of the viewer to create something of its own. And also on my end, for really several years, I worked at a director's workshop, which was more or less the French ripoff of the Sundance Institute. And we were working with first-time directors, and they were usually shooting a couple of scenes from their script, but it wasn't the finished film. It was really a workshop. And we realized that for a lot of finances and for a lot of distributors and agents, it was very difficult to do the gymnastic to realize, oh, I'm not watching the film, I'm watching a workshop. And we realized that it was, at the end of the day, a really bad idea to show them because sometimes it could be hurtful to the film, to the financing of the film. And we're talking about workshops that were done professionally with crews and equipment and everything. So it's true that it can be very, very risky to shoot a couple of scenes with almost no means, because sometimes it can be difficult for the buyer to do the basic gymnastic.
Yeah. I find that I'm always skeptical of rip reels. When people are taking other people's material, it tells me whether or not you can cut, assuming you cut it yourself. And it tells me what movies you like, but it doesn't tell me so much about whether or not you can execute yourself. But there are exceptions to that. Like one of the most effective ones I ever saw, I'm gonna go ahead and throw his name in. He's a Norwegian director, Patrick Severson. The movie has not gotten made, so it hasn't been that effective, apparently, but it's still one of the best reels that I ever saw. It was a thing for kind of a werewolf comedy that he was working on a few years ago, and he already had his lead actor in it. And what made it so effective is that his lead is a guy who's in all of Joachim Trier's films, or at least in all of Joachim's early films. I'm not sure if he's in the last couple, which Joachim makes movies that are radically different than Patrick's. They're not even remotely alike. And so what Patrick did was he went and took nothing but footage of his actual actor in Joachim's movies. So if you understood what the source material was, you knew what he was doing. And he turned it into something that tonally and story-wise was so radically, completely different than what the source material was, that everyone who ever saw it and understood where the footage had come from was all like, oh, okay, you're a real storyteller. You're taking raw material and shaping it into something. And that one was really, really effective, and it did something else, but it was also super, super specific, right? It only worked for a very particular audience. You know, so they're hard, they're tricky. They can be great, or they can be super counterproductive.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sort of leads into comparables as well. and how to effectively use those. I mean, it's, you know, especially if you're working in genre, or if there's like an obvious comparable out there that's going to like pop into anybody's mind as soon as they hear your story, it's good to acknowledge that, and you know, keeping in mind how your project differentiates from that comparable. But I mean, it's good for context, but it's also good to not rely too much on those comparables. I have seen mood reels that bring back the same film multiple times, and that can maybe hurt you because it just gives off the impression that, oh, you're just doing another version of this and that's it. So yeah.
Yeah. How do people feel in general of the whole it's this meets this sort of pitch?
Oh, usually I don't like it, but from time to time you can get like the association that makes you tack. But otherwise, I feel that it's almost a lazy way to create a log line. You know, like, oh, this is an American werewolf in London in space meets Lost in Space. It's a little bit easy, I think.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, there were a whole bunch of pitching technique that maybe 10, 15 years ago made sense, but in the new world don't. So like, you know, the mood reel, for example, I sort of feel like it was a thing at some point, but then yeah, the same thing with the cross between this and this. I sort of feel like it doesn't work anymore. And it's better to have a sort of, you know, you can have references and sort of you know, relevant references definitely help, but not everything has to be a cross between two things. And especially, you know, because you're assuming that people will have seen the two films, and sometimes it's a cross between this obscure little film that nobody has seen, but I have, and Get Out. And you're like, yeah, okay, well, I know Get Out, but I don't know this other one, so that doesn't actually help me at all. Or sometimes they can actually confuse you, because you go, wait, what would be the cross between Dune and Tootsie? I don't get it. You know, so I mean, unless it's blatant and it's clever, I would just say, you know, it's a film in the vein of, I don't know, you know, Saint Sir and Saint Maud, and like you get, okay, so you're saying, you know, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's probably better than cross between, personally.
Yeah. There's a couple little short questions here that just made me chuckle. In a pitch, what can people do in a pitch where you just kind of go, oh, just stop it?
Usually for me, it's to describe the film from beginning to end.
Yes. Yeah,
that's the main one.
That's huge. There's such a big difference between what your movie is about and the plot of your movie.
Yes. Yeah.
I want what the movie is about in your pitch. I do not want the plot ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have sat in a meeting where the filmmaker took me through the project scene by scene, and it didn't end.
And usually the person who pitches that way realize that it's a mistake halfway through.
And they've overcommitted at that point, and there is no easy way to get out of it.
Yeah. They might as well finish up. You know, they might as well go, I know. Yeah, it's probably one of the worst things, definitely.
But it's true that the just pitching a project in a few sentences, it's extremely difficult. Also, that's also that, you know, which get us back to the question of really overly prepared, and you know, almost there is almost like a need to craft a little, maybe 15-second pitch of the film, of just a few sentences to present it.
Yeah.
And if they want to, they'll ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I always, if people include the comparable films thing with box office performance, that's almost never a good idea. And you have people with their first and second films that they want to make for $2 million. They're never going to get cast, and they're dropping box office comparables of things that made 50, 60, 70 million dollars in theatrical release in the US. And to me, that's an immediate flag of you just don't know what you're making, and you're going to be very unrealistic and unreasonable as a client if we take you on, and it's probably more trouble than it's worth.
Yeah. Also, you know, kind of just wildly unrealistic casting wish lists as well that are just not in keeping with your budget. Yeah, not in keeping.
I had somebody this year send me a casting list that included a guy that had been dead for 1.5 years.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
But he'd be totally cheap.
That stood out in ways that you really don't want to stand out. You know, that's a surefire way of getting to the bottom of any submission list on subsequent stuff. If your attention to detail has been that poor, it's going to have consequences down the road. That's another one from this same block of questions. There's a bunch of them in this one that are really good. What is one thing that you would really like to see and hear more of in pitches? Like something that people will do sometimes that you feel like should be very commonplace, but often isn't. I mean, one for me is occasionally, like, I'll have somebody come up and they just start telling a story, or they have a scene from the film. That's just kind of a key moment, and they play out the scene as an introduction. And to me, that always says, oh, okay, like you get it. Like if you can do it successfully, it kind of takes you into the world, and you're like, okay, you're a storyteller. And you've got a story, and you know what it is, and you know how to make it compelling. When that works, it always really, really, really works.
I would also say make sure that kind of the tone of your pitch matches the tone of the film itself. If you're pitching a comedy, don't be afraid to be funny. If you're pitching a horribly serious film, maybe don't make it super funny.
Yeah. This is actually a very good one and ties back to some things that we've talked about earlier. And kind of this time where people are kind of self-taping themselves and doing kind of video pitches and things on a regular basis. Are there tips or strategies to make that video pitch more engaging? Kind of do's and don'ts if you're going to have to present something as kind of as a video link.
I think keeping it short is probably the main one, because if for instance I get an email and there is a link to a pitch in it, if I click on it and it's less than 5 minutes, I would probably watch it now. But if it's 12 minutes, I would probably watch it later. And that's also the difference between me reading the scripts this night or me sending the script to a reader sometimes. And maybe read it later on, but there is really a lot of can be extremely effective to have a short one.
Yeah, 5 minutes I think is a good.
Yes, yeah.
It seems to be the line.
Yes, yeah, because it's enough time also to convey a lot and to convey at least the basics of the story and also to convey a sense of who you are. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one for me when people do this and kind of like we've done the last year of kind of our market, it's been all video pitches like Frontier was, just kind of in the COVID world. And to me, the most surprising thing when people do this is people forgetting that they're filmmakers and they're going to be judged on the quality of the filmmaking of their pitch. If you're going to do it, don't just sit outside in a windy place with a static camera or a shot off your phone and bad audio. You're going to need to shoot it and edit it and put it together and show that kind of there's technical competence there. And then the ones that really sing are the people that have fun with the form, which doesn't necessarily mean spending money. One of the things in the market that I was at last year was a project that's actually being directed by Eric Koo's son. And Eric is producing it for him. Eric is a big time art house director in Singapore. But the thing he's doing with his son is like a war movie creature feature. It's like Creature from the Black Lagoon at the end of World War II on an Indonesian beach. And these guys, it's like they had their audio recorders in their hand. They weren't hiding it or pretending that everything was super flashy, but they made sure they had really high quality audio so everybody could understand what they were saying. And then they took projectors and they were projecting black and white images of kind of their source material and their inspiration material on a plain white wall behind them that they were kind of walking and talking in front of, so that there was kind of this interesting visual element. It cost them nothing to do, but was super effective. And the other one is, because it's a video pitch, to me, work in the language that you're comfortable with. You can subtitle it. If you're not comfortable pitching in English, don't pitch in English. Play to your strengths. You have an opportunity here to kind of completely control your own environment, and you should.
Yeah. Also, to speak to that as well. Yeah, just thinking about what potential strengths can you bring to it, such as like location. If you're planning to shoot locally and you can actually shoot your pitch video in the same place that you plan to film the project, make use of that. Like we had a project from Alberta that was planning to shoot in the Rocky Mountains, and so they went off and they did their video pitch in the location that they are planning to set the film, and it was a really effective, great way to get that across in a super beautiful way.
Yeah. I do want to flag for the audience that we are starting to come towards the end of our time here. So if people want to send kind of some final questions in through the chat, please do so now. We'll probably only get 2, maybe 3 more in before we're up to the end of our time. One other one here that I'd love to get into, and it's a bit of a broad one that I think is maybe a little broader than the person asking realized. It's how many pitches is it good to have on hand, and what should they be? Like a 30-second elevator pitch, a 5-minute one, what else? And how different should a pitch be depending on whether it's to a co-producer, a financier, a buyer, a sales agent, things like that.
Well, I mean, I think I've already addressed some of that, in the sense that, to me, I think, yes, having an awareness of who you're pitching and what are the key things for them. So knowing that, pitching for a public body is different than pitching for, somebody like a financier who's putting some real equity, is going to be, they're just slightly different. I mean, you're talking about nuances. It's still, you're probably going to have this, by and large, the same hook and the same, but you might just put more emphasis on different things. I think having a super quick pitch is a really good idea, because especially, when we hopefully all go back to, more physical stuff, I think having a way of hooking somebody in a polite, kind of, compelling way is a good idea. Like the number of times in my career I found myself, especially in Cannes or in Berlin, where you're on a lift and you go, hey, I'm really sorry, we don't know each other, but I'm a producer, and having a way of essentially setting up a longer conversation down the line in a way that's kind of charming is probably a good idea, to have the super quick one, and then have your sort of classic sort of 8 to 10 minutes one. I've never done long pitches. I mean, personally, I sort of feel like, after 15 minutes, you're kind of, in a way, once I've got all the information that I need, as Lindsay said, there's so much work that goes after that I don't feel like I need more. And sometimes you see those markets where, you get 45 minutes and you're like, oh, we have nothing to talk about. And it's always a bit awkward. So yeah, I would say I think a super quick one is a good idea.
Yeah. And also sometimes I think the super quick one doesn't necessarily mean like the like the 80s view of like, oh, high concept elevator pitch. Sometimes it's just a sense of, oh, it lives in that space and it's that genre, it's that type, and I like it. And when it comes from a producer, what I really like is I love it and I want to do it because blah blah blah, and like the connection from the producer, the producer connection to the material, and why is enthusiastic about that story and that director usually can be extremely compelling in just a couple of sentences.
Yeah, I love the idea of kind of the super tight logline, super focused pitch. And I think what that discipline does kind of as a producer or as a director, when you have to come up with, say, like a 2-sentence maximum logline of a film, is it forces you to narrow right down on what is the actual theme of the movie, what is the actual POV of the movie, and get it in its purest, most to the point essence. And I think if there's value out of kind of that elevator pitch style of things, that's the real value of it, is it makes you distill things down, which I think is super, super valuable. Like basically, I would say the answer to that question is you just be prepared to have lots of conversations as opposed to pitches. And whenever we get back to the real world, I mean, I mostly am not having to pitch because I'm not a sales guy. I'm usually being pitched, but I do also lead a lot of the festival stuff for our company. And so when I'm at kind of TIFF in a normal year or in Cannes or Berlin, everywhere I go, I have every trailer and promo for every active title that we have in my pocket at all times. And you never know what the conversation's going to be. And it could just be as simple as what's the cool thing you're working on, what's the cool thing you're working on, and just swap things back and forth. But to have the ability of just being able to, because there's no excuse now. It's like everybody's carrying a really good computer around in their pocket. You just pull your phone out and kind of all those visuals are there. You can have stuff there to really quickly and easily sort through. And just kind of having that sort of preparation, I think, is useful. This is a good question from Risto. I think especially in these days. Do you have any good advice on how politically sensitive subjects should be pitched? Because that is a thing. Right? I think we all have worked with things that are, we walk into knowing that they're going to kick up a certain type of press response. We're right now there's a film that we're working on at XYZ that's going to be a gala at TIFF before going out theatrically. It's an Indigenous science fiction film that is very explicitly about basically the government sanctioned genocide of our Indigenous peoples and the forcible removal of children from their families. And the Canadian distributor has opted to release it theatrically on Canadian Thanksgiving. They are picking a fight. So yeah, walking into that sort of world, or something that is going to be fairly racially charged, or something that has the potential to be divisive along gender lines. There's reasons to go into all of those territories, and there's really good reasons to avoid them. What decides which side of the line it's on when you're listening to a pitch?
I think also maybe in that context, to make sure that you convey why you personally are doing this project. What personal stake do you have in this project? Might be a good thing to keep in mind. Why are you telling this story? Why are you the best person to tell this story? Would be something to make sure you include in that.
Yeah, for me, it's exactly the same. Is who's telling the story, and that's the key thing. And based on that, I think we have very few we have very few limitation about the type of subject that we can tackle. But for instance, this year at Sundance we had this film called Pleasure, and I think that and it's a film that is highly controversial. It's we just learned that in France the film is going to be more or less going to be to get X-rated. So it's going to be complicated. But I think we decided to do the film because it was connected to the personality of the director and why she wanted to tell that story, and from there it was again an obvious film that we wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, if you're, I think you just have to have the strength of your convictions and be able to put across something that not everybody's gonna respond, but if they, if by definition, if that's the sort of film that you're making, by definition, it's not going to please everyone. And I think also, I think for me it was quite liberating the day I realized that, and I was still quite young, but this moment of like, yeah, when you're pitching, when you're working, when you're collaborating, you can't please everyone. So you just have to be yourself. You just have to own what it is that you're presenting. And, if it's a bit risque, if it's a bit in your face, well, presumably that is a reflection of what you want to do as an artist, and you just have to own it. And then, you will have people who love it and you respond to it, and you'll have people who are put off by it, but, you're going to be rejected anyway, no matter what happens. So as long as you do it respectfully, then, you have to go for it. And if it creates a reaction, maybe that's what you wanted anyway. So I don't know. I think you just have to be truthful to what your intentions are,
And for us, I actually within the company, I always take as a very good sign when we fight over a project, and when part of the team absolutely hates it and the other part of the team absolutely loves it. That's usually a sign that we have to pay attention to that director on that project.
Yeah, we feel the same way.
Yeah.
That's a very common conversation for us.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great, and we are coming to the end of our time. Thank you to all of the three of you for joining us for this. It's been excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cool. Good luck with everything, with your projects.
All right, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other in actual real life sometime soon.
Sure.
All right. Thanks so much. We are going to wrap up.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye everyone. Bye bye.